The day they tried to sell her like cattle was the day the whole town of Red Hollow learned what kind of man Caleb Turner really was. The sun burned hot over the dusty street, pressing down on the wooden buildings like a heavy hand. It was 1884, and Red Hollow sat in the middle of New Mexico territory, a place where the law was thin and opinions were loud. Men gathered in front of the saloon and general store, boots planted in the dirt, hats low over curious eyes. Women stood farther back, whispering behind gloved fingers. At the center of it all was a raised wooden platform, and on that platform stood a girl in chains. She looked no older than 22. Her dark brown hair fell wild around her shoulders, tangled by wind and neglect. Her dress was torn at the hem, once blue, but now faded by sun and dust. Bruises marked her arms, and a thin cut ran along her cheekbone. Yet she stood straight, chin lifted, eyes sharp as broken glass. No fear in them, only fire. "Gentlemen," the auctioneer shouted, waving his arms like this was some grand show. "What we got here is the wild girl from Black Canyon. Been stealing food from ranches, spooking horses, fighting off deputies. Took 4 men to bring her in." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd. "She ain't fit for town life," the man continued, "but strong as any ranch hand. Works hard, don't talk much, bites if cornered." "I don't bite," the girl said clearly. "I cut." A few men shifted back at that. Caleb Turner stood near the hitching post across the street, watching everything without moving. He was 38, broad through the shoulders, sun-worn and quiet, and his black hat shaded eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar ran along his jaw, pale against tanned skin. He didn't smile, didn't laugh with the others. He had come into town for feed and nails, not this. "She's been living alone up in Black Canyon for near 6 years, someone in the crowd muttered. "Like an animal." "Animals got more manners," another man said. The girl turned slowly, scanning faces. When her eyes locked with Caleb's, something shifted in the air. Not softness, not trust, recognition, like 2 wolves measuring distance. "What's her name?" a woman called. "Says her name's Hannah Reed," the auctioneer replied, though no one can prove it. "It is," Hannah said evenly. "And I ain't property," the auctioneer smirked. "County says different. Fined for theft more times than I can count. No one wants to pay her debt. So, we're collecting one way or another." A heavy-set rancher stepped forward. $20, $25, $30. Each number felt like a slap. Caleb's jaw tightened. Hannah's hands were chained in front of her, but her fingers were loose, ready. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't begging. She stared down every man who looked at her like she was something to break. "40, the heavy-set rancher barked. "She'll learn respect on my place." Hannah spit at his boots. The crowd gasped. The rancher raised his hand like he might strike her. "That'll be 50, Caleb said quietly. The street went still. Heads turned. Caleb stepped forward, boots slow and steady against the dirt. He didn't look at the rancher, didn't look at the crowd. His eyes stayed on Hannah. 50, he repeated. The heavy-set man scoffed. "You serious? A Turner? She's trouble." "I know." 60, the rancher shot back. Caleb didn't blink. 100. The words fell like thunder. Even the auctioneer swallowed hard. $100. Caleb reached into his coat and pulled out a thick leather pouch. He tossed it onto the platform. Coins clinked heavy and real. "Count it." Silence hung thick as smoke. The rancher hesitated, then shook his head. "She ain't worth it." "No," Caleb said calmly. "She ain't." The auctioneer scrambled to gather the money, greed shining in his eyes. Sold. To Caleb Turner. The deputy moved to unlock Hannah's chains. You sure about this? He asked Caleb under his breath. She'll run first chance she gets. Caleb didn't take his eyes off her. Then she'll run. The chains dropped to the wooden boards with a harsh clang, while Hannah rubbed her wrist slowly, watching him like he might strike. He didn't. Instead, he stepped back and gestured toward the road. My horse is over there. I ain't following you like some dog, she said. Didn't ask you to. The crowd murmured as she stepped down from the platform on her own. The heavy-set rancher sneered. You're making a mistake, Turner. That girl ain't tameable. Caleb rested a hand on his belt. Good. Hannah paused at that, studying him. They walked side by side to his horse. A tall bay mare stood tied behind his wagon. You ride? Caleb asked. Her chin lifted. Better than most men. He untied the mare and handed her the reins. Then prove it. No saddle adjustment. No help. She mounted smooth as breath, settling into the seat like she'd been born there. He climbed onto his own black gelding. As they started down the road out of Red Hollow, the town watched in silence. Dust kicked up behind them. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and red. They rode without speaking for nearly a mile. Finally, Hannah broke the silence. Why? Why what? Why spend $100 on trouble? Caleb kept his gaze forward. Couldn't stomach watching them break you. Her laugh was sharp. No one breaks me. I saw. The road stretched long ahead, cutting through dry land and scattered sage. Wind carried the scent of dust and distant rain. You think you own me now? She asked. No. You paid. I paid the town, not you. She studied him carefully. And if I leave tonight? She asked. Then you leave. He didn't look at her, didn't threaten, didn't demand. Just answered. And the honesty unsettled her more than cruelty would have. They rode on as the sun disappeared behind the hills. Far ahead, in the fading light, the outline of his ranch began to rise from the land. Hannah straightened in the saddle. She had survived 6 years alone in Black Canyon. She had outrun deputies, hunger, storms, and men who hunted her for sport. But something about this quiet rancher, who hadn't tried to touch her or tame her or command her, felt more dangerous than all of it. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't running. And she wasn't sure she wanted to. The ranch came into view just as the last light slipped behind the hills. It wasn't grand. No white paint. No fancy porch. Just a solid house, built from timber and stone. A wide barn to the east. And fencing that stretched across dry land like careful lines drawn by steady hands. Smoke curled from the chimney. Horses lifted their heads as Caleb and Hannah rode in. Triple Ridge Ranch. Home. 2 men stepped out of the barn when they heard the hooves. The older one, gray-bearded and lean, rested a hand on the gate. The younger, barely 20, wiped grease from his palms onto his trousers. "Boss," the older man called. "Didn't expect you back till dark." Caleb dismounted without answering right away. He glanced at Hannah, who remained in the saddle, eyes scanning every corner of the property like she was mapping escape routes. "This is Hannah," Caleb said finally. "She'll be staying." The younger man blinked. "Staying?" "She works," Caleb added. "Like everyone else." The older man studied her quietly. Not judgment, a just assessment. "Name's Walter Green," he said, tipping his hat. "That's my nephew, Luke." Hannah didn't tip hers back. "Got a place to put her?" Luke asked low. "Room off the kitchen," Caleb replied. "Has its own door." Hannah slid off the mare in one smooth motion. She handed the reins back without a word. I ain't sleeping in your bed, she said plainly. Caleb almost smiled. Wasn't offering. Walter's beard twitched like he was fighting laughter. Inside, the house was clean, but simple. A long wooden table, iron stove, hooks along the wall for coats and hats. No softness except for a woven rug near the hearth. Caleb led her to a narrow door beside the pantry. This used to be storage, he said. Put a cot in it last winter. Window faces the ridge. That door leads outside. He stepped back, letting her look. But the room was small but private. A plain bed, a wash basin, a folded blanket at the foot. It locks, he added, holding up a small key. From the inside. Hannah stared at the key like it was something fragile. He placed it on the shelf and walked away without another word. That night at supper, she didn't sit. Walter and Luke ate quietly while Caleb leaned back in his chair, boots stretched forward. There's stew, Walter said gently. I ain't hungry, Hannah answered. Caleb didn't argue, didn't insist. Meals are at sunrise, noon, and dusk, he said instead. You miss one, you wait for the next. Simple. Fair. After supper, Hannah stepped outside. The air was cool now. Crickets sang in the dark. No shouting. No jeering crowd. No chains. Just quiet. She should leave, she told herself. Take the mare. Head back toward the canyon. But her body stayed where it was. Inside, Caleb stood at the window, watching her silhouette against the moonlight. She'll bolt? Luke whispered. Maybe, Caleb said. And if she does? Caleb's voice was calm. Then she does. The next morning, Hannah was already at the barn before sunrise. Luke nearly jumped when he saw her leaning against the fence. You're up early, he said. I don't sleep much. Walter handed her a bucket without ceremony. Water trough's low. She took it. No complaint. By noon, her hands were blistered from hauling water and stacking hay. By dusk, sweat clung to her hairline and dust coated her boots. She didn't slow down. That evening, Luke tried to speak to her while they fed the horses. You really lived alone up there? Yes. Ain't that lonely? No. He frowned. You don't talk much. Don't need to. From across the yard, Caleb watched her move among the horses. She didn't spook them, didn't rush. She approached slow, palm open, voice low. The wild mare Luke had been struggling with all month stood still when Hannah touched her neck. How'd you do that? Luke asked, wide-eyed. She's scared, Hannah said. Not mean. Caleb stepped closer. Fear makes everything look wild. Hannah met his gaze across the fence. And sometimes it is wild, she replied. A storm rolled in 3 days later. Not rain, wind, the kind that carried sand sharp enough to cut skin. Hannah had been helping Walter mend fencing near the far ridge when the sky turned brown. Get back, Walter shouted, but the wind swallowed his voice. Hannah lost sight of him in seconds. For a moment, the old fear rose in her chest, the feeling of being small against something too big. Then she closed her eyes, listened. She felt the slope beneath her boots, remembered the curve of the land. She moved low and steady, guiding herself by instinct. When Caleb found her near the ridge shelter, she was already herding 2 stray calves toward safety. You shouldn't be out here alone, he said over the wind. She shot him a look. Ain't alone. He didn't argue. Together they pushed the animals toward the barn, shoulders bent into the storm. By the time they stumbled inside, sand scratched their faces raw. Walter clapped her on the back once. You got grit, girl. Hannah wiped dirt from her cheek. I know. That night, she sat at the table, Not at the far end, not near the door, at the side. Walter spoke about cattle prices. Luke complained about a broken stirrup. Caleb listened more than he talked. At one point, their hands brushed when reaching for the same tin cup. Hannah pulled back first, but not fast. Later, when the house grew quiet, she stood on the porch alone. Caleb joined her. "You handled that storm well," he said. "So did you." Silence settled between them. "Why'd you really buy me?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything," he said finally. "And because no one should be sold." She studied him in the moonlight. "You ain't scared of me?" "No." "You should be." He looked at her then, steady and sure. "I'm not trying to tame you, Hannah." Wind lifted a strand of her hair. "Oh, good," she whispered. "Because I won't kneel." A slow nod. "I'd never ask you to." The words hung between them, heavy and honest. For the first time in years, Hannah felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not anger, something softer. And that frightened her more than chains ever had. "Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know." The trouble came before dawn. Hannah heard it before anyone else. Hooves. Not one, not two. Many. She was out of bed in seconds, boots on, knife in hand. The sound rolled across the land like distant thunder, growing louder. By the time Caleb stepped onto the porch with his rifle, Hannah was already there beside him. Dust rose along the eastern ridge. Luke stumbled out of the bunkhouse, pale and wide-eyed.